Linda's announcement struck me like a sharp slap from across the room, and I could feel the atmosphere shift when everyone began applauding Evan, her 24-year-old son, who'd barely been around long enough to locate the break room. I kept my smile in place, my hands calm, because shock has a way of sharpening everything, especially the truths you've been trying not to see. What none of them understood in that instant was this. They had just shoved aside the one person holding their entire operation together. And once I stepped away, nothing would ever function the same again. If you've ever been passed over for someone unqualified, leave a comment and subscribe to hear more stories like this. When people talk about loyalty at work, they usually mean showing up on time, meeting deadlines, keeping things moving. But for me, loyalty became something heavier, something woven into my daily life without me even noticing. After my divorce, Redwood Equipment Logistics felt like the one steady thing I had left, a place where I could quietly rebuild myself, piece by piece, without anyone prying too much. The Pacific Northwest had a way of smoothing rough edges, gray mornings, fresh air, the low hum of trucks pulling out before sunrise. My daughter Ava was 16 then, old enough to see her mother was worn down, but too gentle to say it out loud. She'd stay over every other weekend, sitting at the kitchen counter doing homework while I caught up on route changes or supplier reports, acting like it was nothing. Sometimes she'd slide my laptop closed with one finger and say, "Mom, you need a break." And maybe she was right, but breaks didn't pay for braces or school trips or the mortgage my ex had walked away from. So, I worked and worked. 7 years of missed barbecues, canceled dinners, and late-night emergencies molded me into the woman everyone at Redwood depended on. Routing failures, weather-related shutdowns, catastrophic supplier delays. My phone was the one that rang. I didn't complain. I took pride in being the person who could fix things when no one else could. People said I stayed calm under pressure, but the truth was, I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. The promotion Linda hinted at kept me moving forward. Director of Regional Operations. It wasn't just a title. It was proof that everything I'd given meant something. Linda had worn that thin, professional smile and said, "You're next in line, Tessa. Keep doing what you're doing." And I believed her. Or maybe I needed to. The truth was, I'd built half the systems Evan would later pretend to understand. I'd mapped every distribution corridor between Tacoma and Spokane, renegotiated contracts that saved the company millions, and redesigned our emergency response model after the Cascadia storms nearly shut us down. People joked that if I ever left, Redwood would collapse within a week. I laughed along, but part of me wondered if it might actually be true. Linda relied on me more than she ever admitted. When a driver shortage hit, she called me at 9 p.m. asking for projections. When a supplier and Ben missed a shipment, she wanted me to smooth things over. When the board needed quarterly numbers reframed to cover executive missteps, she asked for my wording. And every time, I delivered. Maybe that's why I didn't notice how exhausted I'd become. Tired of carrying what no one else would. Tired of pretending it didn't sting when Linda took credit in meetings. Tired of believing that hard work always pays off if you're patient enough. The problem was, patience only works when the people above you have integrity. I didn't know it yet, but the people above me had something else entirely. They had plans that never included me, no matter how many all-nighters I pulled or how often I saved them from embarrassment. But right before everything unraveled, I still believed the future was finally tipping in my favor. I still believed the promotion was mine. I still believed loyalty meant something, right up until the day it didn't. The morning of the announcement felt oddly calm, the kind of calm that settles in just before a storm you don't realize is coming. I walked into the conference room with my notebook in hand, prepared for what I truly believed was a formality, because Linda had told me we were aligning leadership with performance, and I'd been carrying performance on my back for years. The room smelled like burnt coffee mixed with the faint sting of industrial cleaner, that familiar blend every logistics office seems to absorb into its walls. People buzzed with energy, smiling, whispering in that way people do when they think they already know how things will unfold. A few offered encouraging nods. Someone mouthed, "Good luck," and my chest warmed with that quiet, hopeful certainty that maybe, finally, all the sacrifices were about to mean something. Linda stood at the head of the table with her binder, her son Evan positioned beside her like a decorative prop. Polished hair, new blazer, shoes that had clearly never stepped inside a warehouse. He flashed an eager grin at the room, and I forced myself not to read into it. Linda cleared her throat and launched into her practice speech about growth, evolution, and Redwood's future vision. I waited for my name. I waited for acknowledgement of years spent managing crises, renegotiating vendors, expanding regions, and rebuilding operations. I waited for her to confirm what she'd implied for months, that the director role was mine. Instead, she smiled wider and said, "Please join me in congratulating our new regional operations lead, Evan Grayson." For a second, I honestly thought she'd misspoken. My mind refused to process the words. My hands froze on my notebook. The room filled with applause, not enthusiastic applause, but obligation applause, the kind you give because authority expects it. Evan stepped forward like he'd just won a national award, his grin stretching ear to ear. "Thanks, everyone," he said, offering a small wave like he was accepting a trophy. My pulse pounded in my ears, heat crept up my neck, but I didn't move or speak. I just clapped slowly because anything else would have revealed exactly how I felt. Linda gestured toward me with an open palm. "I want to give special recognition to Tessa," she said. "She's been instrumental in helping Evan understand our operations, a true team player." That line, rehearsed, sanitized, and hollow, landed harder than the announcement itself, helping Evan understand our operations. I'd walked him through a single basic routing scenario 2 weeks earlier, and he'd spent most of the meeting asking whether our distribution partners had cool logos. He didn't grasp the fundamentals: geography, weather impact, supplier dependency, union constraints. None of it. Yet there he stood adjusting his blazer like he'd earned something sacred. People glanced at me, waiting for a reaction. I smiled. The polite, professional smile women learn out of survival. Linda wrapped things up quickly, handing Evan the floor for a short speech about innovation and youthful strategy. He used phrases he didn't understand, tone-deaf corporate jargon about optimizing vertical alignment and modernizing pathways, words that meant nothing in an industry where timing, relationships, and ground-level experience decided everything. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped back, and people formed a loose line to shake Evan's hand. I stood slowly, letting the crowd thin, feeling Linda's eyes on me, waiting to see if I'd crack, cry, or unravel. Instead, I gathered my notebook and walked toward the door with controlled, deliberate steps. Evan intercepted me with a bright, clueless smile. "Hey, Tessa, I'm going to need your help getting settled into the role. Mom says you're basically the backbone of the department." Basically the backbone? The phrase lodged in my chest like a splinter. He didn't mean it as an insult, and that somehow made it worse. He genuinely had no idea what had just happened, how deeply unfair, how humiliating, how blatantly obvious the power play was. I nodded once, the motion small and tight. "Congratulations," I said. The word tasted metallic, and in that moment, surrounded by the echo of fading applause and the weight of everyone's eyes on my back, something inside me shifted. Not broken? No. Something sharper. Something that had been too soft for far too long, because while they celebrated their victory, None of them seemed to realize what they had actually done. They had just handed the entire operation to someone who didn't know how to run it, and they had pushed away the one person who did. The day after the promotion announcement, the office felt different, like everyone was pretending not to stare at me while quietly waiting to see if I'd break. I moved through the halls with the same steady pace I always had, answering emails, resolving a warehouse misscan, reworking a supplier routing backup, anything to keep my mind from replaying Linda's smile as she handed my future to her son. By late evening, only a handful of lights were still on. Most people had already gone home, but I stayed behind to finish a vendor reconciliation Evan had ignored earlier that day. I didn't want to think about him, or the promotion, or the applause, so I buried myself in the numbers until the building felt quiet enough to breathe. I headed toward the break room for water, passing Linda's office along the way. Her door was cracked just enough for sound to slip through, and normally I would have kept walking, but something in her tone made me pause. It was low, tense, a tone I'd never heard her use in public. "He'll be fine," she was saying. "He has the degree. He just needs time to grow into the role." A man's voice answered, tight with doubt. "Linda, the board is already asking why we bypassed Tessa. She's the one who kept this region from falling apart last winter." My body went still. I hadn't meant to listen, but my feet anchored to the carpet before I could stop them. "Tessa is dependable," Linda said, almost dismissively. "But she's not leadership material. She's good at the grunt work, not the big picture." The words cut clean and sharp. I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself as heat rushed into my chest. Grunt work. 7 years of saving her division from collapse, and that's what she called it. "And besides," she continued, "Evan needs this. You know how hard he struggled after the Seattle internship didn't work out. He needs a win." The man sighed. "A win? Linda, this isn't Little League. He's managing a multi-state operation." "He'll learn," she said quickly. "He has to. And Tessa won't fight it. She can't afford to. Not with a mortgage and a teenage daughter. She'll stay in line." The floor felt like it shifted beneath me. Stay in line. So that was the plan all along. Use my competence to prop Evan up, knowing I didn't have the luxury to push back. They'd counted on my silence. They'd counted on my need for stability. They'd counted on me caring too much about holding my life together to risk losing my job. "If anything goes wrong," Linda added, "she'll handle it. She always does. And Evan will get the credit he needs to move upward. Eventually, she'll settle into supporting him permanently." My breath caught, not loud enough to be heard, but loud enough inside me that it felt like something fundamental cracked open. Permanently. That was my future in her mind. A lifetime of doing the work while Evan held the title. A lifetime of being the safety net for a man who didn't know the difference between a routing alert and a supplier escalation. Their voices dropped into quieter tones, but I'd already heard everything that mattered. They didn't respect me. They didn't value me. They didn't even see me. I was a tool. Useful, predictable, and safely invisible. And I stepped back from the doorway slowly, careful not to make a sound, each step down the hall feeling heavier and more deliberate as the truth settled into me like stone. They believed I wouldn't fight because my life was complicated, my responsibilities too heavy, because I couldn't afford to walk away. But as I reached my desk and shut down my computer, a strange calm moved through me, cold, certain, undeniable. They had underestimated the wrong person, and they were about to learn what that mistake would cost. Walking into the office that Friday morning felt strangely liberating, like I'd already stepped outside the version of myself they thought they controlled. I didn't rush or scramble to fix whatever fires Evan had likely started. I hung my coat, made coffee, and sat at my desk with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The resignation letter waited on my screen, every word sharp and steady, written only when the fog finally lifts. I printed it, folded it neatly, and slipped it into a plain envelope. My hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed even. They expected humiliation to make me desperate, but instead, it made me fearless. Around 4:30 p.m., as people packed up for the weekend, I walked toward Linda's office. Evan stood in the hallway, fumbling with reports he clearly didn't understand, giving me a nervous smile that sparked an unexpected flicker of pity. He wasn't cruel, just unprepared, elevated into a role he didn't know how to carry. Linda stepped out as I approached, her expression already tight with the stress she tried to hide. "Tessa, do you have a minute?" she asked, smoothing her blazer. "I do," I replied, handing her the envelope before she could continue. She blinked. "What's this?" "My 2 weeks' notice." The air went still. Evan froze. Linda tore it open, scanned the page, and color rose in her cheeks. "You can't be serious." "I am." She stared, waiting for me to break, but silence unsettled her more than anger. "You're leaving because Evan got the promotion?" "I'm leaving because it's time." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Think this through. You have a daughter, a mortgage, responsibilities." There it was, the leverage she thought she owned. "I'll manage," I said, and her frustration sharpened. "This will make you look impulsive. No company wants someone who abandons their post." The words didn't sting anymore. "That's your opinion." "It's reality," she snapped, then softened. "We value you, but Evan represents where Redwood is going. Innovation, new leadership. You still have a place here." The place she always intended, the workhorse behind her son. "I appreciate the clarity," I said, and for the first time she faltered. "Take the weekend," she insisted. "Come back Monday and we'll forget this." "No," I said gently. "This is the right decision." Evan finally spoke. "Mom, she handles everything. What are we supposed to do if she leaves?" The truth landed hard. Linda tried to shut him up, but it was too late. "You'll figure it out," I said. "Just like I will." "You're making a mistake," she said. "Maybe," I replied. "But it's mine to make." I turned and walked away, the lights buzzing overhead, phones ringing in distant cubicles, the building feeling lighter, as if it already knew I was free, and for the first time in years, so did I. Monday morning carried that kind of tension you feel before you even step inside the building. The parking lot was fuller than usual, people walking faster, shoulders tight, conversations clipped. I knew before I even reached my desk that something had already gone wrong. Evan's office door was wide open, and he sat hunched over his computer with 3 spreadsheets pulled up, his face drained of color, looking like someone trying to read a language he'd never seen before. He startled when he noticed me walking by. "Tessa, thank God. Do you have a second?" His voice cracked. I paused, not because I planned to save him, but because I needed to see how deep the damage went. "What's going on?" He swallowed hard and pointed to his screen. "Northern Timber Consortium is threatening to pull their contract. Something about shipment delays and an escalation protocol. I can't figure out what they're talking about." That account alone was worth nearly $4 million a year. I leaned in just enough to read the email. The issue was obvious. So obvious anyone with field experience would have caught it instantly. A supplier in Tacoma had updated their lead times due to equipment failure, and the automated routing adjustment Evan approved on Friday didn't account for the shift. His decision had pushed all deliveries back 3 days. For Northern Timber, 3 days meant a full production halt. "Did you review the routing exceptions before approving the shift?" I asked. His eyes widened. "There were exceptions. The system didn't warn me." "It did," I said quietly. "You just didn't know where to look." Panic rippled across his face like a fast-moving shadow. "Can you just fix it, please?" "I wasn't obligated to," Not anymore. But the fallout from this would hit every warehouse, every driver, every customer relying on us. And truthfully, I wasn't ready to watch the region I'd spent years building collapse in real time. So I sat beside him and walked through the steps. How to reroute urgent deliveries, how to negotiate temporary supply transfers, who to call first, how to frame the apology. He took furious notes like a student cramming for an exam. 2 hours later, Northern Timber agreed to stay. Barely. By lunchtime, word had already spread. Copper Ridge Metals was complaining about mislabeled manifests. Bend Industrial was threatening penalties because their shipment didn't match the size requirements we'd guaranteed. Every issue pointed back to decisions Evan had made without understanding the consequences. Linda stormed into the operations bay around 1 p.m., her lipstick sharp, her eyes sharper. "Tessa!" She barked into my office. I followed her back, watching the tight set of her shoulders. She shut the door the moment we stepped inside. "Did you tell anyone you're leaving?" "Only you," I said. "Why?" She paced behind her desk, rubbing her temples. "The board has called for a status review on all regional accounts. They're hearing noise about operational failures, and now Northern Timber is demanding explanations." I didn't respond. She wanted a confession, reassurance, something to anchor the chaos swirling around her. "Tessa, be honest with me," she said. "Are you doing something to undermine Evan?" The accusation didn't surprise me. It was easier to blame me than admit she'd placed her son in a job he couldn't handle. "No," I said calmly. "Your son is undermining himself." Her face twitched. "He's overwhelmed. It's his first week." "That's not overwhelm," I said. "That's an experience." "Then help him," she snapped. "I'm still here," I reminded her, "but only for 9 more days." Her breath hitched, a small, involuntary sound. "You can't leave now. Not when everything is on shaky ground." There it was. The truth she'd been trying to avoid. She needed me. She always had. And losing me now wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous. "You'll manage," I said, echoing the same words she'd thrown at me days earlier. For a moment she looked like she might cry, scream, or beg. But she did none of those things. Instead, she slumped into her chair, as if the weight of the entire region had been placed on her spine. The rest of the week unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. Every morning brought a new crisis: wrong inventory counts, delayed dispatches, missing confirmations, furious customers demanding answers Evan didn't have. I trained him when the mistakes threatened the stability of the whole operation, but I didn't shield him. I didn't stand between him and the consequences Linda had orchestrated. By Friday, he looked 10 years older. Linda looked worse. Their perfect plan was collapsing from the inside, and all I had to do was keep doing my job quietly, professionally, without saving them from themselves. That's when I realized something unexpected. I didn't need revenge. They were already manufacturing their own. I was 3 weeks into my new job when the first call came from an old warehouse supervisor at Redwood. His voice carried a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction. "Tessa, you should see what's happening over here." I stepped into an empty conference room and closed the door. He didn't wait before spilling everything. Northern Timber had finally pulled their secondary contract after Evan mishandled another routing chain. Copper Ridge imposed financial penalties so steep, accounting couldn't hide them. Bend Industrial bypassed Evan entirely and sent a furious email directly to the board. Within days, 3 more clients hinted they were exploring competitors, including the one I now worked for. Word traveled fast in logistics, faster than trucks on the interstate. People trusted competence, and they remembered who protected them when things went wrong. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. But a quiet understanding settled in me. Consequences don't vanish just because someone in power ignores them. They wait, they accumulate. They land exactly where they belong. A week later, my new manager slid a business magazine across my desk. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said. The cover headline read, "Redwood Region Collapses Amid Nepotism and Mismanagement." My chest tightened as I skimmed the article. It detailed a cascade of operational failures, customer defections, and internal complaints. It mentioned anonymous employees describing unqualified leadership and a critical loss of institutional knowledge. They didn't name me, but every line made it obvious. Evan had resigned after a challenging period of transition. Challenging was a generous word. Linda had been relieved of her duties following a board-led investigation. The article referenced irregularities in the promotion process and potential ethical breaches in corporate language. That meant they had uncovered everything I'd overheard behind her half-closed door. Toward the bottom of the article was a line that made me pause. Several former Redwood clients have reached out to Silver Coast Logistics, specifically requesting to work with their new regional director of routing strategy, citing trust and proven expertise. My name wasn't printed, but it didn't need to be. My phone buzzed with 2 new client inquiry emails before I even finished reading. Later that afternoon, during my break, I sat in my car staring at the rain streaking across the windshield. Part of me expected to feel vindication, triumph, something fiery and explosive. But what I felt instead was something quieter. Relief. Relief that the truth had surfaced without me lifting a finger. Relief that the weight I'd carried for years had finally rolled back onto the shoulders that created it. A few days later, I ran into a former coworker who told me Linda blamed me for everything. "She says you orchestrated her downfall," he whispered. I shook my head. "No," I said. "She orchestrated her own. I just stopped shielding her from it." And as I walked back to my office, a simple, undeniable truth settled into place. Walking away had done more damage than any confrontation ever could. They built their empire on assumptions. I simply removed myself from being one of them. Months later, during a supply chain conference in Portland, I spotted Evan sitting alone near the back of the hall, a badge from a small startup clipped to his jacket. He looked up when he recognized me, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he offered a quiet, sincere, "I'm sorry." I nodded. There was nothing left to dissect. He'd been placed in a role he wasn't ready for, pushed forward by someone who couldn't see the damage he was doing. I wished him well and meant it. When I stepped outside afterward, the air felt clearer than it had in years. My phone buzzed with another new client request, another door opening because I finally walked away from the ones that kept me small. Revenge hadn't been the point. Growth was. And the life I rebuilt didn't come from fighting them. It came from choosing myself. Looking back, what stays with me isn't the betrayal itself, but the quiet strength I didn't know I had until I stopped carrying everyone else's weight. For years, I thought being indispensable would protect me. I thought showing up early, staying late, and keeping the entire operation stitched together would prove my value. But arrogant leadership never sees the people holding the structure in place. They only see the parts they think they can rearrange. Losing that promotion forced me to realize something uncomfortable. I had built an entire life around being needed, but not around being valued. And that difference cost me more than I admitted at the time. It cost me weekends with my daughter, restful nights, a sense of dignity I didn't even know had slowly drained away. Still, the moment I stepped back, everything they assumed I would hold together collapsed. Not because I sabotaged them, but because the foundation was always mine. Seeing that unfold taught me a truth I wish I'd learned earlier. Competence is power, but it becomes real only when you stop letting others exploit it. If I were sitting with a friend right now, here's what I'd tell her. Document everything. Not out of paranoia, but out of self-respect. Don't confuse loyalty with letting people walk over you, And never believe you're trapped just because someone in authority tells you that you are. Leaving doesn't always burn bridges. Sometimes it simply reveals which ones were never stable. How to get started today. Write down the work you handle that no one else sees. Set one boundary this week and honor it without apology. Notice who respects your limits and who only respects your output. Update your resume even if you don't plan to leave. Ask yourself where your value is recognized, not just used.